Allison Gilbert is one of the most thought-provoking and influential writers on the topic of grief and resilience. She's the author of numerous books, including the groundbreaking book that we have in the back of the room today, Past and Present, Keeping Memories of Loved Ones Alive, where she shares some really actionable tips, which I appreciate. It's more than just theory. It's really how you can put it into practice. And she also shares some of them on her social media. Her stirring work exposes the secret and essential factor for harnessing loss to drive happiness, spark creativity, and rebound from adversity. She's also an Emmy Award-winning journalist. And some of her other books include Parentless Parents, How the Loss of Our Mothers and Fathers Impacts the Way That We Raise Our Children, and another one called Always Too Soon, Voices of Support for Those Who Have Lost Both Parents. She's also the co-editor of Covering Catastrophe, Broadcast Journalists Report September 11th, the definitive historical record of how broadcast journalists covered 9/11. She's the only female journalist to be featured in the September 11th memorial downtown, and the emergency triage tag that was put around her neck on that day is actually on display in the museum. And her name is announced by Robert De Niro on the official audio tour. Very exciting. Allison is a contributor to CNN.com, the Thrive Journal, the Huffington Post, and she was named a contributor to Oprah Magazine for her recently published piece, The Reflection Effect, which you may have seen. And you may have seen her, if you recognize her, it may have been on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, many other places. She has a familiar and warm face. I hope that you will welcome her, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Lauren, thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I want to talk today about grief and resilience, and I think that December, this time of year, is an especially great time to talk about these topics. At no time of year for many people is it the pain more acute to have lost a loved one, so I'm thrilled. So thank you so much. I want to start perhaps somewhere a little bit unexpectedly, which is a job posting that Google has recently put online. And I want to point out to you, probably you're familiar with something like this, and I want to point out to you some of the characteristics that Google is looking for. Someone who is fully dedicated, someone who can help shape, someone to lead, someone who is actively working, and someone who is hands-on. What I want to suggest to you today is that the same characteristics that Google is looking for are not unique to the job search. These are the same characteristics that'll help you move from a place of pain, eventually to be resilient, and to have resilience be a part of who you are when it comes to this, and eventually, over time, experience joy. So what do I mean by resilience? Let's just take a look at this for a second. Webster defines resilience as the ability to recover readily from illness, depression, or adversity. Now let me just say before we start, loss is very different for every individual, right? Everyone sitting here has had a different experience. It could be that you've lost a parent, right? Or a spouse, or God forbid, a child. These are very real, and they're hard, and everyone, even within the same family, has experienced this very differently. And so my experience is, this is not a picture of my daughter and me. That is a picture of my mother and me with a really great red plastic fish comb. My mother died when I was 25, so basically right out of college in my first job, and she died before I got married, and she died before I had children of my own, and this was a great pain. And I missed her. She had ovarian cancer, and I was there with her in that time that she needed me. But getting over it wasn't like watching my clock. It was hard, and I got help. I really did get the help that I needed at that time. My fiance at the time was a great support. He's now my husband. My in-laws to be were a great support. They provided this incredible scaffolding. But for some reason, it really wasn't enough. And I was wondering why all the support, because I was lucky, right? A lot of people don't have that kind of support. So I did recognize that I had people around me who were trying. And I did see a grief counselor. I did avail myself to support groups, but still, I recognized that even the type of grief support that I was lucky enough to receive wasn't giving me what I really needed as I was moving forward. And I'll get to that. I'll describe what that really is. There is something that I want to call and bring your attention to, which I call death etiquette. Death etiquette is what I took advantage of when my mom first died. And I think we're all familiar with it, so we can look at it here. People come to funerals. They attend wakes, they go to shivas, there's food involved, we feel supported, we say prayers, we say poems, and of course, right, if we're lucky and we have that support, we get lots and lots of phone calls. People are there. They know how to show up, typically. They know their role, they take their place, and you receive this support, and it helps. For me, as I moved on, I realized that I didn't have the right tools that I needed, and it caused great tension between my brother and me. And we're still close. But at this time, when loss was fresh, my need to keep my mother's memory alive, my need to talk about her and keep her present, was not what my brother needed. And that's okay, except at that point, his not needing to do what I needed made me feel lonely. It caused tension, it made me feel resentful. These are not good things to have when you're feeling a loss and you're trying to rely on your brother who lost the same mother, right? And then it hit me. It hit me what I was missing, that I was being passive. I wanted people to still come to me. I wanted my brother to call me and not me think about him calling me. I wanted him just to pick up the phone. And I realized I needed to move from this passive state to being proactive. I needed to take control of remembering. In order to keep my mother's memory alive, I needed to go forward and do something, because what I needed to do, what I was really wanting to do, was remember her, but how? I honestly did not know where to begin. Where is that guidebook? Have you seen a guidebook that actually tells you how to remember someone? That is why I wrote Past and Present, because there was none. And that was what was really tearing me apart. It hurt, because I didn't know the tools. So we've talked about death etiquette, and I want to bring your attention to something that I call remembrance etiquette. This helped a little, right? We're familiar with it because we have been exposed. People light candles, they visit cemeteries. There are lots of customs that are personal or communal. But the part of this that wasn't sinking in, that didn't help me because it wasn't concrete. I didn't know what to do with my mother's photographs. I had so many to go through. All the old videotapes, how do I even play a VHS tape nowadays, right? These old home movies. There were so many things that my mother left behind that I didn't know what to do, and it felt really heavy. Not that the books were heavy, the responsibility of choosing what to keep and what to part with, what to donate, what to just pass along to other family and friends. Because there was no roadmap, it felt fraught. And there were other things, of course. There are collectibles, right? If your loved one had collectibles and they're not meaningful to you, but they were meaningful to them, there's a weight. Of course, there's jewelry, papers. There's a mountain of papers. And this may look like a stack that you can just toss. But if you've lost somebody and maybe there's handwriting on those papers, right? It quickly becomes something else. It's not so easy to trash papers when your loved one had touched it or there's their handwriting on it. It feels a little bit more, you got to really do some thinking before you do that. Passports, of course, tell a story about where your loved one has been, and of course there's furniture, right? What do you do with all this furniture? So this was the practical stuff that I was missing. What to do. And so we've talked about death etiquette, the people who show up because they know their role, they take their place, they know how to support you. We've talked about remembrance etiquette, what you can do, not all the time, right? There's candles and there's cemeteries, but what can you do whenever you have that need to remember? So I call it resilience etiquette. Resilience etiquette is different because it's what you do for you, right? It's how you can take control, right? Again, this moving from being passive to really taking the reins and being proactive. That is what that is about. How to deal with possessions, of course, and how to leverage everyday technology. And I mean this sincerely. We have our cell phones all the time. We're on our laptops. Remembering shouldn't be so hard. If we can only integrate it in what we already do, if it could be seamless and kind of live where we already are, I think we would all be more successful. And that's a tool towards resilience. And eventually, by following these bullet points, if you will, it will allow you to pivot, I believe, from feeling that grief and eventually feeling joy. So I want to conceptualize this a little bit further and dig a little bit deeper into what I call this before and after. And I want to contrast that to what I talk about, which is being and, this word and. So before my mother died, my brother and I used to always enjoy this dessert that she made. I don't know, it just wasn't good. It wasn't that it was particularly great, but it was hers. And so after she died, I couldn't bring myself to make it, right? So the before, I enjoyed it, and after she died, I couldn't bring myself to make it, so therefore I couldn't taste it again. I couldn't smell it again. And so something that was so integral to my childhood was also gone because I didn't have the tools or the ability or the emotional fortitude to kind of look at that recipe and go forward. The and part came later, when my kids were old enough to go with me to the grocery store. So this is my mother's recipe for this really not so great fruit platter pie, this dessert. But there are a couple of things here that really do bring me incredible happiness. One is that my mom was a math major in college. Her name was Lynn, and no one, I think, on earth would, in the third paragraph, kind of talk about arranging the fruit in concentric circles. And so when I show this to my kids and I can really talk about their grandmother and who she was, right? There's little clues and I can drop them into conversation with my kids. But the real fun was how I got them to really understand why this recipe was so important. So when they were really young, I did make work for them. They didn't, of course, realize it was make work, but it was. I had them copy this recipe down on 2 separate pieces of paper. Really, just the ingredients so we can go shopping. And the reason why I did that is, of course, you know, kids learn by doing. They learn by not just memorization, but by writing things down. So I just wanted them to copy this over. That was step one. That was step one of my and, right? The integration of the before and the after being my life as a mom who was happy to live this life with my kids. The next step was taking them to the grocery store and making a scavenger hunt out of shopping for Grandma Lynn's fruit platter pie. It wasn't about my mom anymore. It was about helping my children create a relationship with their maternal grandmother who they never met. And so the scavenger hunt became shopping for Grandma Lynn's fruit platter pie. And then, of course, we came back and we would make it together. Another example of moving from passive to being proactive is doing something with this. These are the slides, the old films. These were like pulling at me. I didn't know what to do with them. How do you digitize this? Where do you go? And then what? So you have it digitized, but then you just have like family movie night? Like I didn't know what to do and my kids would be bored. So I found this company called Legacy Republic. And what they do is that they digitize your assets, and then they allow you a really seamless way, a very easy way of taking little snippets and uploading them. You can email them, you can post them on Facebook. And the most awesome thing about it, here's a little clip of my mom. The most awesome thing about it is I didn't have to work very hard. I'm on Facebook, I'm on email every single day. But the benefit of it going on Facebook is that that's where my kids are anyway as teenagers. So again, they can see a clip of their grandmother. I'm not preaching to them. It's just a part of what they see in their feeds. It just makes their grandmother just a little bit more real. And it gives me incredible happiness to know that they have some sort of connection to her. Because my biggest fear after my mother died is that it would be like she never existed. So in my book, Past and Present, there are 85 opportunities for remembering a loved one and celebrating what they still mean to you. We can use technology. We can repurpose objects and heirlooms so they can actually be something that you want to have and not just sitting in your house unappreciated. There are places to go, but it's not just holidays. I know I'm here in December, and I know it's the holiday season when loss can feel particularly raw. But if you've lost somebody, of course you miss them other times of year. So I made sure that I address things that are not just tied to the calendar, right? It's really important. But of course, there are dates on the calendar that are landmines, right? And we want to recognize those too. So I definitely included a chapter about very, very month calendar specific opportunities. So I want to talk to you about 3 actionable ideas. That's the whole point of the book, is like what you can do right now to celebrate or remember your loved one. So the first thing I want to talk about is using a Google Doc. This may sound easy to you, but to me, it was a really big aha moment, because when someone you love dies, there's generally speaking someone who is anointed as the family historian, right? And that could be a role that that person wants, and oftentimes it's a role by default. And they really don't want to be that family historian. They want to share. It could be a burden. So using a Google Doc, instead of crowdsourcing, I call it Family Source. Get everyone to contribute the family recipes, and of course you can upload photographs as well. You've met my mom a little bit. Her name was Lynn. I think a great tool is using social media. So for example, on the anniversary of my mother's death, or maybe it's her birthday, or maybe it's around the holidays, I could inform my family, maybe a week or 2 ago, or maybe a month preceding, hey, on this particular day, let's gather around the digital water cooler, right? Let's post something, and let's all read each other's comments. Let's see each other's pictures. The other idea is very specific, let's say to Facebook. And a lot of people these days, of course, post pictures of their loved ones on certain days. That is an awesome, helpful thing to do. The way to enhance that is to really harness the power of social media, which is what some people don't do. And that is to ask your friends to post their remembrances in return. So then you, as someone who is bereaved, can feel supported by the stories that come back. So then it's a dialogue. And maybe they upload pictures too. Now this next idea may look a little strange. That is a daffodil bulb. And this particular idea is really, if you haven't had a loss yet, this is a particularly good idea if you want to give something to someone who you care for if they've lost something, if you want to have a new tool as a friend. So when my father passed away a few years after my mom, my stepmother Cheryl was given a gift. she was given a basket full of daffodil bulbs. Now, if you know anything about daffodils, you plant them in the fall, and they come back every single year in the spring. It's not much work. You just kind of plant them, and they show up every year. She was given 63 daffodil bulbs because my father, when he died, was 63. So every bulb was a celebration of my dad's life. Now, that is a lot of daffodil bulbs, right? So this gift cracked open yet another amazing opportunity for remembering my dad, which was that my stepmother had an opportunity to make this a social opportunity. She could invite me and my husband and my kids, her grandchildren. She can invite my brother and his wife and his kids. And then we can invite friends of the family and neighbors. And now you have a party. Now you have a social opportunity built around celebrating my dad's life. And to her, it was something incredibly heartening about sharing this moment, that it wasn't just for her to do on her own. So those ideas, and many more like them in past and present, are really all about keeping the memory of a loved one alive. We've talked about death etiquette. People generally know their role and take the place, but you are a recipient of that support. And we've talked about remembrance etiquette, which may not be repeatable, right? You light a candle. I mean, how repeatable? Maybe it's an annual. You light a candle, you go to a cemetery. But generally speaking, these opportunities are about what you can sustain and how they can make you happy. So generally, I like to end where I began, which is to suggest to you that the same characteristics that you would use to be successful in a job search, to buy a home, to get an apartment, to get a girlfriend, to find a new, you would have to take steps. You would have to do something to get what you want. And if your goal is to stay connected to your loved one, whether it's the holidays or any time of year, I would suggest to you that the same characteristics are applicable. And they would help you move from a place of sadness to being resilient and to eventually experiencing incredible joy. So thank you, and I would love to take any questions because I love talking about this topic. Any questions whatsoever, and I'm so grateful to be here. Yeah.
Thank you for coming and talking with us.
Yeah.
How do you know when you're ready to move from passive to proactive? And if there's no way to know, do you just start doing and hope that it catches up, I guess?
That's a really good question. I think loss is so individual. And some people might be ready to be in this place sooner than others. From my experience, this took me a beat. This took me a while. I had to move from feeling like my mom dying when I'm 25 is really unfair to get married without my mom was incredibly sad and left me feeling truly great pain on my wedding day, in addition to the happiness that comes with marrying. That's how great I feel about my husband. Boom! And so I think it's individual, right? Which I know sounds like a non-answer, but truly it's the best answer. So for me, when I showed you a picture of my brother and me, they were warning signs that I needed to be, proactive, because I wasn't getting what I needed from my own family. And that was no fault to my brother, right? Like, I'm not blaming him. I love him. He was just experiencing this loss differently, and he has different emotional needs. And so once I stopped thinking I should be getting something from my brother or my husband or my in-laws or anyone, it was really helpful because I could just turn inward and give myself what I needed. I guess that's like a good marriage, right? You don't rely on your spouse to give you your needs. You kind of take care. It just, once I started owning what I needed and not relying on others to give it to me, once I was proactive, it helped me. So I think you have to decide for yourself if that would then bring you joy. It's really, like, I think you would kind of feel it.
Having had, as most people, several experiences with grief, I'm always fascinated when I see people at work and they come back quicker than they need to. And typically what they'll say is, well, I just needed to get away from it, and I just needed to work so I could, forget about it. And I always get really concerned because, I never confront them about it, but I'm always like, well, then are you really addressing it? And because you can do things to avoid, or you can do things to go down a path of reconciliation. And it's hard for me to know what people are doing, because I know what I would do, but I don't really know what they would do.
Right. I think when work is really it's very porous right now. What happens at home versus kind of how you go forward at work. Things have never been more porous, right? We kind of can't leave home at home anymore, right? With email and texts. I think there is something to be said for compartmentalizing and being able to bring that focus to work, and that's a whole other talk that I love to give. But my point is also this, which is I think incredibly instructive to this conversation. Grief experts have always said, these are people who are really wonky and who really dig deep into the literature of bereavement. They've always said that keeping the memory of a loved one alive is essential for healing. Like, you must remember a loved one in order to be fully, they call, resolved in your grief. It's one of the tenets that many experts point to, but yet they never gave people the tools. And so that's where past and present comes in. The reason why I mention this is that you can do that actionable work before or after you're in the office, right? It doesn't have to be 24/7. No one is saying that it should be. But there's a time and place where if you avail yourself to these opportunities, then when you go to work, you can actually be stronger because you've kind of put your oxygen mask on first, like you've attended to what you actually really need to do outside of work. So when you are here, I actually agree, when you are here, you can be fully present because you haven't ignored your feelings. It's quite the opposite. You've embraced them, you've honored them, you've given them their own space to breathe. And that maybe should not happen at work, right? You need to be focused. But that's not ignoring it. That's embracing it, just in a different time and place. So, yeah, it's a good question.
Actually, I have a question too, really quickly.
Yeah, she has a question too.
I think the New York office has lost several people this year. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions for people who are grieving a colleague or perhaps a friend and not just a family member?
I think thank you, Lauren. I think that one of the toughest things about loss is when people pretend it didn't happen. As if you went up to a colleague and you're afraid to even say that they have been out of the office and now they're back. Somehow that the asking will somehow reignite their pain. I guarantee you that person is not thinking about their loved one because you haven't decided to bring them up. It's with them. So I think one of the wonderful things you can do to support a friend is actually to acknowledge it directly. That's a gift.
So you spoke about etiquette.
Yeah.
And I wish that people would understand about that. I lost my dad when I was 24, and I recently lost my mom.
So sorry.
I haven't said that out loud yet. And at work. And people, like my friends, haven't either experienced a loss or they just have no common sense. Because they'll say to me, it's been a couple of weeks or it's been a couple of months. Why are you still sad? and I'm functioning, like I'm at work every day, I'm productive, I'm good at what I do, at least I think I am. So I go about my life, but yes, I'm caught in a place of sadness and being angry with people a lot. Do you have suggestions of just how to, I guess, either not necessarily inform people, but when they say things that drive me crazy, I just need to walk away. I don't have the patience for it.
Well, first of all, I feel like I want to give you a hug. I really do.
I'll take it.
I can give you a hug because that's painful, and I totally get it. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
So I get it, because when I said before, you said your dad was 20, you were 24 when your father passed away, so my mom, I was 25, and so I feel like I'm with you. It's hard because that's young. And so you do really have this other experience. And so I had that too. And so part of the ownership is realizing that your friends are incapable of truly understanding where you're coming from because that experience hasn't happened to them. It's akin to, someone having a different job here at Google. You may work in the same company, but it's not like you can go fly into another department. Does that make sense? So your friends haven't had your exposure to loss yet because you're young. And so the one advice I would have is something that I learned, and I said I was lonely and resentful. Do you remember? Of my own brother. And so it's to acknowledge that they're on their own journey, and yet they probably want to know how they can support you, but they don't know how. And so if you gave them a little bit of a roadmap saying, you know what, I like talking, I'm not sure if this is your case, but I like talking about my mom and dad. Don't avoid talking about my parents. Let me share with you a memory, particularly today if it's a birthday or an anniversary. I think giving them a vocabulary that gives them permission, they may not know how. And so that's part of being proactive too, is telling your friends what you need. And then of course telling them what you don't. So I hope that's helpful, but I think it's hard. Sometimes it's hard telling your friends what you would like them to say to you. But I think there's power in owning those words to your friends. You're welcome.
I have a question more about, or I guess seeking advice. So in our family, we have those who are being, I guess, more proactive and those who are being passive. And I feel like I'm the third party right now, and I'm witnessing both, and I'm witnessing all the tension. And it's like a lot of, I don't know, to throw a psych term out there, triangulation happening. Any advice there?
When family members are on different pages, you mean?
Yeah, and I feel like they're coming to me because they're just not seeing each other.
And you're caught in the middle.
Side. Yes.
Well, that's an awful place to be. Yeah, you know what, I would actually, I would take myself out of being in the middle. I don't think there's any reason why I don't know, but for me, that would cause me to feel really tense and taking on roles and responsibilities within my family that I don't think I would sign up for. And so in that particular scenario that you've just described, I would remove myself and then inform your family that's what you're doing. Because just by doing it without telling people what your intentions are would actually be odd, and they probably wouldn't know how to navigate that. But if they're really using you as a pass-between and you don't want to serve that role, rightfully so, then I would actually articulate to them that it's making you uncomfortable and you don't want to play that role.
The books for a Christmas gift.
Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? This really is my favorite topic, so.
Hi, thank you. It was very interesting, and more importantly, I think it felt very genuine and honest. My personal obsession is with legacy. And it feels like everything around the etiquette and whatever you choose to do afterwards is more for the ones who stay, not for the ones who left, for those who have lost people. You spend a lot of time trying to do some interpretation in terms of, maybe he or she would have liked that and that and that. So I was wondering, you mentioned social media, and I think social media is very awkward towards death. Sometimes you get invites for a specific game, which is probably spam on Facebook from someone who passed away, and you're like, well, that could have been avoided, or you get a birthday notice. So I was wondering, have you seen or have you thought about companies or just different type of technologies to help maybe us, our generation, to decide what we're going to do with our legacy and what we might do with our, I want to say, electronic or digital personality?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Did everyone hear the question? It's about your own legacy and what to do about that. There are a lot of companies that help you with password protection, how to let your family into your digital world so they can have access to that after you pass away. I really don't want to endorse any particular one, but that is an option, right? It is an option for a lot of people to take advantage of. It can also be an analog way. You don't have to involve a company. You can literally, I know people frown upon writing down their passwords, but if that is with your other legal documents and there's a piece of paper, then you just tell your family, where that piece of paper is in your safety, deposit, your safety box in your home, your fire retardant box. You don't have to go through the company route, right? You can just write it down on that piece of paper, which is perfectly serviceable. But the one thing I would add, I wouldn't just stop there. You must tell your family and friends where that is, right? Or even give it to an attorney to hold on to with the rest of your papers, which I think is very popular now too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you.